hits, Elimelech decides that it would be better for his family if they left and they moved to Moab. And while they're there, Elimelech dies. Suddenly, it is the impression that we get here from the scripture. And now Naomi is left by herself with just her two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Now they're there for about 10 years. Eventually, her two sons get married. They marry a couple of Moabite girls, Orpah and Ruth. And so they're there living in Moab, but then the sons die, one right after the other. So Naomi not only has lost her husband unexpectedly, she's now lost both of her boys. So let me tell you, for those of you who've been in this place, and I know it's true for some in this room, I know personally that you're going through a dark place even now. It's a very dark moment for Naomi, very dark for her family. Now, most everyone in this room has experienced some kind of loss. So in some, again, it's very recent for you. And if that's you right now, it's very raw where you are right now. I'm sorry. Our church is praying for you, and we're praying for God's peace and His comfort in these days. But you know it's true, and you're experiencing it personally, that death is a part of life. Maybe you've lost a parent or a grandparent. Maybe you've lost a spouse. Maybe a very dear friend of you that has passed on. Some of you have even lost your children. And if that has happened, and it happens suddenly, then it's even exceptionally tragic for you. And a few of you in this room have experienced all of these losses, some in a very short amount of time. And so you've walked through, and maybe even continue to walk through some very dark days. Darkness, it comes from pressure, it comes from crises, it comes from loss. And it's not a matter of if, but when darkness comes our way, it's going to happen. You cannot prevent it most of the time. But what's more important is not focusing on the pressure, not focusing on the crises, not focusing on the loss, but what's more important is how you respond to them. Because how you respond says much about your faith. So I want to spend a few moments talking with you about some mistakes that were made by this family. As this darkness descends upon them, we're going to see that they're not responding as well as they should have. They don't make the best of choices. And we know that sometimes happens when people are grieving. But their poor responses show us what not to do when we face our own dark moments. So let me just point these out to you. There's three of them here that I want you to see. And I want to challenge you not to do some things, but I'm going to offer you a counter of some things that you should be doing. And here's the first. So how do you respond when darkness comes your way? Well, the first is this. Don't lose faith. Don't lose faith. Instead, trust God. We're going to see an indication here in verse 1. If you go back to it, an indication of how Elimelech is losing faith in the Lord. He's losing his trust in Him, if he ever had it. Look at verse 1 again. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. A man of Bethlehem in Judah went to, and note this word here. If you underline your Bible, underline this. They went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his two sons. So you need to know that this family is in a very bad spot at this moment. There's no doubt about that. They've got to do something. Things are troubling them. So what does he do? What does Elimelech do? He picks up his wife and his kids, and they head out. He runs, particularly. He's trying to flee from the problem. And specifically, he leaves his homeland and he heads to Moab. Now, if you know much about the geography of the Middle East, particularly in the Palestinian area, in Canaan, what you see here is you'll see Israel sort of westward of the Dead Sea, but on the far side of the Dead Sea to the southeast is this country, an open country known as Moab. It's a large area, a plateau known for its grain production. So it only makes sense if you're having a famine on the other side of the Dead Sea that let's go to a place where we know they've got lots of grain and they've been able to store it up and we can live for a while. And so, but keep in mind though, I told you to underline that word sojourn. That's a key word here. They're going to Moab, but just temporarily. It's not for the long haul. They're sojourning there. That word sojourn means to live temporarily someplace else, just for a time. And not as a permanent resident, but as what we would call as a visitor. They're basically refugees. And it makes sense. I mean, a man's got to do what a man's got to do, right? You've got to take care of your family. Here's the problem. We have no indication that God has told them to go. We have no indication that it was God's plan for them to leave Israel. In fact, it wasn't God's plan for them because they were the Jews. They were God's people. He had given them the promised land. That's where they were supposed to be, in Israel, not in Moab. Besides, Moab isn't just another country out there. Moab is the enemy. I mean, they were pagans. They had afflicted the Jews for a period of time, the Israelites, for about 18 years. They were trying to persuade them to leave their faith in the one true God and call them to embrace belief in a pagan God. And so they were pagans. They were known of leading people away from God. And you need to know God was repulsed by the Moabites. So much so, we get this particular command about them in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Here's what they were told. No Ammonite or Moabite may enter the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of them may enter the assembly of the Lord forever. And as far as God was concerned, He didn't want them following after Him. And so the last place that the Lord would want Elimelech's family to be was in Moab. And yet that's exactly where they fled. And it was telling. It showed that they really didn't have faith in the Lord. They didn't believe that God would get them through the famine. Instead, they should have trusted God and believed and trusted that He would take care of them. You know, one of the saddest things to see for me as a pastor is to see Christians who run when the going gets tough. And I see it all the time. There's a little sign of trouble, a little bit of conflict, and off they go. Running from God, they run from God's people. You know what happens when you run from trouble? You're fleeing and try to deal with it in your own terms. What you're doing is you're missing out seeing what God can do in that dark moment of your life. You know, the grass, they say, always seems greener on the other side of the fence. You know why that is, don't you? More manure over there, right? Those of us who have lived long enough, we know that even though it appears that it's greener on the other side of the fence, there are problems on the other side of the fence. You can't outrun them. You can't distance yourself from them. Listen, we are a people of faith, and so likewise, that means that we should walk by faith, not by sight. And so when darkness comes your way, trust God. Go